All right, let's consider the dashas and a few snapshot techniques to see how dashas can work. Now, dashas are complicated, and they're as complicated as looking at a chart, because you can only properly predict for a dasha if you know how to read a birth chart. And what that means is that if you are looking at a dasha for, say, the planet Mercury, well, then you need to look at the birth chart. And so in this particular combination, we see Mercury's in the 4th house. We need to look at Mercury. We need to see what is the dignity of Mercury, being an enemy's sign. So that's going to tell us that, first of all, the indications of Mercury, just in the general life path, are going to have some difficulties with it. Now, Mercury is getting supported by Venus here. Let's see here. Supported by Venus. Not too much, really. But still, since it's in the same sign, Venus is going to be helpful. Mercury is getting agitated by the Sun, because it's conjunct the Sun. So Venusian things are going to help to support Mercury, the affairs of women, relying on one's sense of form, design, and beauty, maybe even the fine arts, relationships. The Sun is going to cause some difficulty to Mercury. The Sun deals with authority figures, people in areas of power. So this is very general. We're not getting too detailed here. But these are some basic things that you can start to see within the Mercury Dasha occurring. Now, once you know what Mercury means in Aquarius, once you know what it means to have the ruler of the 8th, Mercury rules the 8th and the 11th, in the 4th, once you know that, that's going to create the umbrella for the experience of the Dasha. So what do? Well, you find your book that has all the indications of this house lord and that house lord, or if you've taken the step-by-step astrology class, the video download class from Asheville Vedic Astrology, you will have gotten that document, or you can wait for the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology Volume 2 to come out, which will have all this. And that's going to give you a strong sense of what the person can expect. Now, is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? Are you going to focus on the positive or focus on the negative? Well, if the planet's in good dignity and has a lot of support from friends, then you focus more predominantly on the positive. If it's in bad dignity and is getting hurt by enemies, you focus more predominantly on the negative. Now with dashas, this is not going to just be within the birth chart. We also have to look at it within each divisional chart as well. Because you can go into a planetary cycle of a planet that is bad in the birth chart, but maybe it's exalted or in Mula Trikona or in an angle or trine in good dignity in a particular Varga. And whatever area of life that Varga rules will show in that particular dasha, there's more support. But what we have to remember is that there's always this sense of overlap, meaning that if you look in someone's birth chart, and let's just use this birth chart for example, and we see Mercury is in an enemy dignity, and it's in the 4th house, which is opposite from the 10th. That's going to tell us that when it comes to career, this person is going to have more of their attention either on their home, or they're going to have more attention in regards to their personal emotional development, maybe even more attention on their mother, however we like to think of it. But it's not necessarily going to be that strong of a career indicator because it's in the 4th. It doesn't even rule the 10th. And it's in an enemy sign. And then if we go to the D10 and we see that over here in the D10, Mercury's in the 3rd house in the D10. Well, what's the 3rd house? The 3rd house is a house that deals with struggle, that deals with self-effort, of doing our best to overcome difficulties. So that's going to tell us, first of all, that there's going to be some stress when this person goes into the Mercury Dasha dealing with career. And we see that just like in the birth chart, Mercury is an enemy's dignity. So once again, Mercury isn't that supportive for career, which means they're going to have to do some remedial measures. That's all. They're going to have strength from other areas of their chart, but just in a general sense, we will see that during the Mercury Dasha, there's going to be more sense of struggle, more sense of trying to overcome obstacles, hard work within the career. How do we do that? We looked at the dignity. We looked at the Varga. We looked at the dignity of the planet within the Varga, and we looked at the placement of the planet within the Varga. Now, we can do this as well in regards to relationships. And this brings in the idea of transits in relationships. Well, if we look at the Navamsha, person being in a Mercury Dasha, which I believe they went into about 2 or 3 years ago. What do we see? But Mercury is in the 12th house of the Navamsha, which means again that there's going to be some sort of sacrifice or loss in regards to long-term committed relationships. Mercury is in an enemy's dignity, so likely to say that the sacrifice will not be necessarily one that they enjoy, and there will be some sense of grief and loss during that particular Dasha, the Mercury Dasha. And sure enough, when the person went into the Mercury Dasha, they were in a relationship, and that relationship did not last. It eventually broke apart. And this brings in the idea of transits, because when they were in this particular Dasha, what was happening, but Rahu was going through their ascendant, and Ketu is going through their 7th house of relationships. And anytime the nodes go through that kind of position, if there's a weakness within relationships, and how do we tell if there's a weakness? We look at the Navamsha. Seeing the Dasha Lord in an enemy sign with Rahu, with Saturn, in the 12th, in the Navamsha, that initially tells us of a weakness being there. And what triggers the weakness? But transits trigger the weakness. Okay, so the transit of Rahu and Ketu kept them in the relationship because they still had some karmic issues to work through, but that eventually caused the separation, along with the influence of Saturn transiting over the ascendant. So these are ways that we need to really start considering how to look at dashas. We need to know what each house means, what the indications are the houses are. What does it mean to have a planet in a particular house? And again, you can review the previous videos on the houses to see which houses are going to be supportive, which houses are going to be harmful. And then you want to use the dignity to see if it's going to result in something greater or just continue to make a problem worse. And that can help us to see the remedial measures we need to use. And then you need to see if there are transits triggering the situation. Remember, the dashas show you the possibility. They show you the capacity for what might happen. But you have to be in the right place at the right time with the right people. And the transits are the right people, the right energies that ignite an event. Okay? Now, let's look at a different chart. So here's another chart, another Scorpio ascendant, and very different. What do we see? This person's also in a Mercury cycle. Similar thing, started Mercury cycle around the same time period within their life. And within this particular chart, well, Mercury's now in the 10th. Mercury is in a great friend sign. So now we see more energy is going to go towards work and career. Mercury does rule the 8th house, which does give change and transformation. Mercury rules the 11th, which gives gains, which shows that when she goes into the Mercury cycle, well, yes, there's going to be some sort of stress due to its 8th house rulership, some change or transformation, but which is going to lead to higher gains, again, because that Mercury is in good dignity. Now, I did mention to this person that since K2 was with Mercury, the thing we have to be aware of is that this can contribute to a person thinking that the change is going to result, it's going to be much easier than their actual experiences are proving, and so they need to not necessarily rely on just thinking it's going to work out better than it is, but actually still maintaining that sense of hard work and discipline, because Mercury can be a bit playful, which means they can drop the ball from time to time. So that's positive. Now, if we look at the D10, same thing. What do we get here? Mercury is in the 10th house within the D10, one of the best placements within the D10 to have a good planet. Mercury's in a great friend sign. Again, going into the Mercury cycle, better opportunities for work. Now, it was when they went into the Mercury-Venus cycle when, oddly enough, the person lost their job. You'd think that would be bad. Well, what we always have to remember is that 8th house causes change and transformation. Is it going to be bad? Well, is the 8th house Lord in good dignity? Mercury is in good dignity, which means that, yes, the change and transformation is there, but then what did they do? They ended up starting their own business, starting their own work. And it was also during a time when Rahu and Ketu was transiting over this person's ascendant. And what was going on during that time was that in regards to their work life, in regards to their partnerships and so on, they were dissolving, they were reorganizing. And sure enough, when the proper Dasha came along, what happened? They ended up starting their own business. leaving the work behind. And it was stressful at first, obviously, but now they feel very confident and they're very happy. And when they ask me, what do I think about this potential? Well, when I saw all this confluence, and also seeing that eventually, very soon, Jupiter will be transiting this person's 10th house. Jupiter is a good planet for Scorpio ascendant. That tells me that this is a ripe, positive time for the person to be doing just the thing that they're doing. So again, what we can see here is that we have to look at the combinations of the impact of planets within the birth chart. We need to look into the particular Varga that rules the area that we're dealing with, see if it makes sense there. And if they point in the same direction, for this chart, it was easy for me to say, yes, that was a good move. And it was confirmed by this person's sense and the positive results they're having and how they're moving forward. It made sense. They all lined up. With the other chart that we looked at, Mercury was mainly negative. So this person wasn't coming to me because they were in a joyous time of transformation. They were coming to me because they were in a particularly difficult time in regards to their career, which is what both of the Rashi and the Dasamsha said about those things, even in regards to relationships. Now with this chart again, the one we're looking at currently, if we consider relationships, well, Mercury's in a great friend sign. It is in the 6th house within the D9, which is going to show that yes, there might be some difficulties in relationships or difficulty with closeness within relationships. But again, Mercury's still in a great friend sign, which means that it's not necessarily going to lead to anything probably more difficult than just some challenges. And again, probably from the fact that this person is starting a new business, and so they're not going to have as much time for the relationship. So the relationship is going to draw a deficit. But still, great friend sign. It's not as bad as if this would have been in an enemy's dignity. If it was in an enemy's dignity or debilitated, then what I might have said was that there would be problems with the relationship. So why would I have said that? Because also we would have had this Rahu and Ketu going on, triggering it, right? So if you have a issue going on within the D9 with relationships, and you see a trigger, Rahu and Ketu, transiting this position, well then, that's easier to say that the problem will be with relationships. All right. So this will go across the board with any particular situation. You want to look at the charts of the areas of life the person's interested in. You want to see what is the indications of the planets by house placement, by dignity, planets with it, Diptati Avashtas, Lajatati Avashtas. And then you want to see, are there any transits that are going to make it worse? You know, for example, if someone is in a particular period where relationships are indicated to be bad, and then you see Saturn going through a person's 7th house, well then, you can almost fairly accurately say that you're probably going to lose that relationship, or it's going to feel too stressful for you, or the person might leave you. So all these things are ways to look at dashas, and there's quite a bit more, but this is what you need to start doing, start considering. And one last thing I would like to say is that not always does the dasha come together. And I mentioned this in a previous video, that a lot of people want me to do 12-month reports or even longer, and they want me to predict things for their chart. But sometimes it never lines up, meaning that you can see maybe difficulty with children in the 5th house within the birth chart, but then you go and you look at the Saptamsha, and you don't see it there. So there's one possibility, but it's not confirmed. Now, if you see a dasha happening, you might say, well, there might be a little bit of issues going on, but it has to all come together. You have to have the dasha lined up in the birth chart in a particular Varga. You have to have a transit triggering it. And when you get all of those things, then you get an event happening. It's what Ernst Wilhelm calls mutual agenda. He goes a little more detailed. I find his methods a bit mind-boggling in the sense that there's a lot to look at. So if you think this is complicated, try to get this first, and then move on to Ernst Wilhelm's courses in regards to the dashas. They're very good, but you can get a lot of really excellent information just by considering these principles. The Rashi's comparison to the appropriate Varga, and then seeing if transits activate that particular situation. Okay, that should be it. The only other thing I would mention was when it comes to transits of certain planets, for example, in this person's chart, Saturn is exalted. which means that this person probably is going to work with Saturn a little bit better than, say, the previous chart, where Saturn is in a great enemy sign. So when it comes to transits, one other little additional bit of information you can add to see if something's going to work out positive or negative is you need to see how I don't know if the word is strong. What is the quality of the planet in the person's birth chart? If the quality of the planet is good, even if it's a malefic, they'll probably work with it better. If the quality of the planet is bad, that'll cause them to suffer more when that particular negative transit comes around. And it works the same way with benefic planets. If a benefic planet's very good, then the person will get greater gains when that benefic transits sensitive points within the chart than, say, if that benefic planet was in a great enemy sign or severely starved by other planets. Because our birth chart shows us our capacity to respond to transits, essentially. And the better we have those planets already within our chart, the better we can respond to them. And that's very similar to, if you're, again, a musician and you are just naturally a good musician and someone gives you an opportunity to go perform in a large venue, you're going to do a heck of a lot better than, say, someone who gets that same opportunity but doesn't really know their instrument that well. So it's the same thing. The planets represent our innate capacities already within the birth chart. And then when transits go through, whether they're negative or positive, it will be dependent on the disposition of those planets within our birth chart. And you can strengthen those. That's what remedial measures are for. That's why we chant. That's why we try to consciously connect with these energies, these forces within us, so that we're not necessarily bound by the birth chart. So always remember that mantra, worship, service, anything that connects you to, helps you understand how the planets work better, will allow you to work with transits better as well, which is why, again, spiritual practice, meditation, I do Kriya Yoga, practicing self-inquiry. It gives you distance from those energies, that consciousness, and allows you to then come back and engage them in a conscious fashion. So that's why meditation, yoga, really understanding what you are in relation to your karma is very helpful for you. So experiment with this, and don't make something up. So if you don't see something lining up, just don't make a prediction about it. Don't say anything about it, because it's got to line up in order for it to work out in practice. So find those times in your life where something specifically happened. It wasn't nebulous, it was very concrete. I quit my job, I got this better job. I had a child, I was seriously injured. And then look in your chart and see what can cause that. And then see what transits were going on during that time that would relate to it. And then you'll start to get things lining up. And you may need to experiment with ayanamshas. For example, there's the Lahiri, there's KP, there's the middle of Mula Galactic Center, there's Shri Yukteswar's ayanamsha. There's so many. I think there's about 12 that I know of. And if you don't see it lining up perfectly, experiment with these ayanamshas. Eventually, you'll find the one that works very well for your chart. And sometimes there are even different kinds of dashas. So like in this dasha, or in this chart, other alternative dashas would be the Shodashatari dasha, or the Kotarasama dasha. So these are conditional dashas which are particular to a person's their own chart. So this wouldn't be necessarily applicable to my chart or to your chart, but due to certain circumstances within this chart, they are. And that's a whole other topic in itself. But anyway, for now, keep this in mind and try to start working with these really basic principles and see how they line up. Let us know your experiences and your results.